All right, unmuted
Thank you.
myself
Yeah,
now, and
right.
I think I'm good to go. Just check that my screen has shared with you, so hopefully you can all see that. I want to thank the team at GMG first for pulling out all stops to make this happen, and it's an absolute pleasure to be online. I obviously can't see you all, so I'll wave, and those that can see me will hopefully get that as well. This is officially my first webinar / presentation, so I'm really excited, nervous, the whole bit. But something that I don't get to do when I speak internationally is get to recognise that I give this presentation today on the land of the Kaurna people. And the Kaurna people are the custodians of the lands here in Adelaide in South Australia, where I'm born and raised. And I'm really proud to mention them today online. It's a great honour to be able to say that. I'd also just like to take a chance to pay my respects to many of my colleagues who may or may not be on the line, but I know we're all suffering immense challenging times at the moment with friends and family, and my thoughts are with absolutely every single one of you. Today I'm going to talk about the transformation journey that Oz Minerals is on, which as a mining company you might think is about how we mine, the types of rocks we might be looking to discover, the kinds of deposits we're interested in having. But really what it is for Oz Minerals is it's about culture. And everything we do comes back to the people we want to have in our organisation, the people we want to partner with, work with, engage with, and we're certainly feeling the benefits of having a cultural focused organisation right now. And what you see on the screen there is what we call the OZWay. And obviously a little play on words, but it was a simple model for us to really try and put value creation at the absolute heart of everything that we do at Oz. And it's about making sure that in every decision that we make, in everything that we do, we're taking ourselves on a journey. And the journey starts by thinking about the context that we operate within, the choices that we then make as a result of that context. We move through our strategy that's set at the time, which is really focused on value creation at its heart. We then have into our enablers, which is our governance structure. We have the work that we then choose to do and the performance of that, but ultimately it all ends up at creating value for 5 different key stakeholder groups, that being our employees, our community, our governments, our suppliers, and our shareholders. And at Oz Minerals, they are all seen as equal stakeholders. There is not one that has more value created for it than the other. We strive to keep that equal. We're proud of our purpose. We only released our purpose statement at the end of last year. We've come out with the purpose of going beyond what's possible to make lives better. And this for us is a combination of our desire to have a leading edge and innovative culture, but one that is also focused on value. So going beyond for us is really about thinking about what is beyond for you, and what's possible for one person is really different to what another person might say, but it's about having those conversations, finding what possible and what going beyond is for you, and making sure you keep value creation at the heart. So I'm going to talk about a few things in the larger transformation and innovation landscape and try and bring it back to how am I looking at transformation for Oz Minerals following the OZWay. And I often think about where mining companies and the mining industry at large sits in terms of global brands, and global brands that people that walk down our streets know and recognise. And I look at this document from 2019, and in all of those top 100 global brands, I don't see a single mining company. And this is really confronting for me because I'm a proud employee of a mining company, and I have been for many, many years, and I love the work that we do. But so what that says to me is that it isn't necessarily as connected or as understood as maybe some of these bigger brands that have a more consumer-based pull and a consumer recognition. But you'd be hard-pressed to find brands on that list that don't consume minerals and that aren't reliant upon our industry. And I think there's a really interesting context going on at the moment, and I think we'll be challenged as we come out of this current COVID-19 scenario, where people may look at consumer-based brands and their relationship to mining in new and emerging lights. But what is clear is that things are changing, And as a sector, we can't stand still or we will get left behind. And there was quite a movement at the back end of 2019 with a lot of these consumer brands wanting to purchase ethical and green metals and be associated with companies that were doing good. Now, you can define what good might mean, but they really want to have a strong brand right through their value chain. So on top of that change that's going on at the moment, we're also at a point of significant change as we move from what scientists predicted to be the end of the 5th wave of innovation and into the 6th. Now, I have used this picture probably the last 3 years, and the representation of 2020 has never meant so much to me as it does today. And to see 2020 on this chart as a predicted year of a significant shift where we would end the previous wave of innovation we were in and emerge out as a new one, where we're focusing heavily on automation, robotics, digitalization and sustainability is absolutely phenomenal to see the moments that we're living right here today and think what that could possibly mean for the next journey of companies, products, jobs, skills, capability, everything that comes as a result of that change. Something else that I think is just a really interesting observation on these waves is they're getting shorter. They're getting shorter, they're getting faster, which means we're able to create new innovations and bring them to market and see them follow their path through much quicker than we've been able to in previous cycles. Now, whether it's explicitly clear or not too, there is also one other pattern that jumps out of this, and it's the way we use and consume energy is changing across each of these cycles as well. And I think that there is absolutely a shared view across the industry that the energy that we whether we buy it, procure it, use it, and whether that's fossil fuels, coal, nuclear, wind, solar, there's so many different types, but there is definitely a push that we have to reduce our emissions, we have to reduce our overall footprint. And so to see the emergence of energy at this wave is a fantastic opportunity for the industry. So if I go through to the next slide, I'm trying to be really fancy here and run my speaker's notes on one screen and my slides on the other, but I'm not as fast as Andrew at moving between screens. I was fascinated when I first picked up this work done, and many of you may have seen this work by the Imperial College of London with the table of disruptive technologies. And there are people sitting there in their homes now looking at different ways that they can bring technologies to light. And everything that you see represented on their disruptive technologies table is something that somebody believes is possible to execute. They believe they can do this now. Now, whether they can do it commercially or not is the question. Is there a market for what they've created? But they do think that the science is behind it. And what is interesting for me is some of the things that sit there in yellow are in a horizon that people thought were much further out into the future and may not be things that we necessarily need to think about today. And when I look at things that are on there, it fascinated me that something such as what I think is way out there in terms of human organ printing sat there with smart energy grids, where for me, smart energy grids have escalated so fast that they're now perceived to be almost a no-brainer when you're establishing new mine sites or new communities. So I'm always fascinated at how do we actually predict the time frame of when these things are going to become into our marketplace. And I can probably speak to James's comment before. It's about finding those innovators and those early adopters that really want to get behind these things and try and create that market for some of these technologies to come to life. So we've got a couple more slides on the context, because this is really talking about the world we're living in. And Oz Minerals made a decision quite a number of years ago that we were going to continue to carry our brand, a modern mining company. And we never defined what being a modern mining company was, but a lot of people really did draw to the fact that people are changing and what they're expecting from going to work every day and the types of behaviours they'll have to go to work every day is changing. And their expectations, particularly of the next generation coming through, and the way they see work and the way they see the joy they want to get out of the time they spend at work and the things they can do as a result of the time they spend is believed to be changing. And as an organisation, we were not fit for that. And we started a journey about 4 years ago to start developing some skills and capability in this space. And as much as we have been critical of ourselves at time at the rate of which we've been able to progress, these last couple of weeks have shown us that we are well in front as we've been able to transition a very significant proportion of our workforce immediately to remote working and be established both technically and with the mindset to be able to do that. But we've still got a long way to go. And I think that this is probably now not a choice, but maybe something that is going to be expected going forwards at a much faster rate than we were initially thinking. So I had to have one slide at least that talks about where we find good rocks, because I think that's a really important part of being a fantastic copper miner that I think Oz Minerals is. And I'm always glad when I am chatting to my Swedish colleagues that we still have our exploration activities happening there up in the north of Sweden at in the Lannavaara region. We're up there in a joint venture project, and that has been happening for the last 18 months. We are very heavily Australian focused. We do have 2 operating mines now in South Australia, our Prominent Hill operation, which has been running for the last nearly 12, 13 years, I think, and please don't quote me because I've probably just got that wrong. We have recently transitioned that operation to a fully underground operation and have ceased mining in the open pit. And we have just completed the first parcels of concentrate from our Carrapateena operation in South Australia. So that was under construction for the last 18 months, and that's a really exciting sub-level caving operation that is up and running now and has been in the Oz Minerals portfolio since 2012. So we're very excited to see that develop through. We've also just finished a late stage study at the Musgrave Province region in partnership with an organisation called Cassini Resources. That's a copper nickel project, and that is currently being evaluated for progressing through to its next stage. And then our exciting acquisition from a couple of years ago of Avanco Resources in Brazil has meant that we've been able to start to develop the provinces out around the Gurupi and the Carajás province and to bring those projects online. So as much as there is a number of lines coming out of Brazil, they're all very closely located together. Our Australian operations are much further spread. So if we take the context that we work on and then we start to move into over into our enablers in terms of the OZWay, and something that really is in the enablers is about the people that we have within our organisation and the way we get them to engage. And I often like to think about it in terms of 2 lenses. One is around how do we build entrepreneurism and how do we foster intrapreneurism. And there's a really interesting balance between those 2. And entrepreneurism for me has been described to me as if you are up in space and you are trying to blow up a balloon, and there is nothing that stops you from blowing that balloon up, and you just keep going and going. You've got all the resources that you could need, and eventually it probably explodes. Sorry, you don't have all the resources you need, I should say. Entrepreneurism is like you have resources, you have everything you need, but you've got that balloon firmly underwater, and you're blowing as hard as you can to fill up that balloon with air, but the pressure that is surrounding you is making that really, really hard. And I liked the reference because to me, that's sometimes how it feels to work in innovation and change roles in any organisation at any level, whether that is your defined role or not. So how do we get the balance between the 2? We don't want people off basically clambering for resources and trying to get things moving when they've got a good idea, but they're struggling and they're spinning their wheels. But we also don't want people to feel like they're limited by the rules and things that are in place. And so we've really been trying to focus on how do we foster those 2 together to create the right people. And we've brought a number of Adelaide's entrepreneurial community in from our startup scene. And we've been starting to learn about some of the things that they put in place to push some of their things through. The other thing that I think is really interesting when you look at culture is how different people can be depending on the surroundings that they have been existing within. And Hofstede's theory has been a fascinating tool for me to have a look at. And I purposely put Sweden on there with Australia and Brazil. I apologise to people from our other countries that I haven't put on there that are online today. The free online tool only lets me pick 3, but I do encourage you to go and have a play because it's a fantastic tool if you're interested in this. And it just quite simply shows that building an organisation and trying to build an innovative culture where people bring their ideas forwards and then can also be free to raise those ideas, but also think about the opportunities for the organisation at large to grow and to benefit are different depending on where they may have lived or grown up and what their societal rules around them may or may not be. And I think it is quite interesting for me when I look particularly at what stands out very obviously is the masculinity section. And when I look at what that actually means, that is it's about a competitive nature. It's about, do we feel like we need to compete with each other to come out on top, or do we really want to collaborate and try and get to a solution? And I really do see that as being a distinct difference between the work we do in Northern Europe and the work that we do in Australia. And how do we get that piece where you can get that balance between not over collaborating to a point that you don't make movement, but where you're not competing with each other. Instead, you're working to stand on each other's shoulders. And I think there is something that GMG is filling a spot in there for the community to work on these kinds of projects together. But the more you start to unpack in terms of the differences that you've got in each region, the harder it becomes for a company to centralize the way that they want to run their various different sites and their various different projects. And this is why we have adopted a devolved organizational structure, and we're really focused on making sure that each project has all of the authority and accountability to run itself based on its local region, its local people, its community, and its cultural norms to be able to thrive in that environment that it exists within. So then when we start to get into the work that we're doing, I find this is quite a little interesting way to have a look at the types of work that we do around and where we see ourselves in terms of being an industry, that has ever had to really change itself a great deal. And really what this slide is saying is that, yes, we know we have incredibly high fluctuating demand as an industry, and often we ride on those changes in demand, but we really haven't had a high level of technology uncertainty. We've really been able to do what we needed to do with what we've had. And I think that my personal opinion is that these days are starting to change. And whether that talks to the rise of digital technologies and things such as your automation and or your emergence of sustainability activities and the need to use green energy, I think there is an opportunity coming for people to start to think about how do we use or introduce technology uncertainty that will actually start to see us become a more thriving and adaptable business or industry as we start to change in this new world going forwards. And thinking back to that 7th wave of innovation, what does that look like and how are we adapting to survive? So it's quite an interesting one for me. And it's certainly, when I think about some of the challenges that we face, and when I talk to people that work on projects such as things related to various levels of environmentally friendly leaching techniques or low energy comminution, or even the age-old challenge of really going fully autonomous. These are things that have been being worked on for many, many years, and there are, in some cases, 50 or 60 years of research, and we haven't been able to move. So it makes me wonder why is that? What are we not seeing? What are we not looking at? And so that's why we've started to try and introduce a real risk-based working approach, where for us at Oz, when we use the word risk, that means threat and opportunity. It has been a language challenge because most people say risk and opportunity, but we've really tried to encourage our workforce to see it as threats and opportunities. And if you do present something as a threat, we really encourage our workforce to double down on that and come back with it also written as an opportunity so that we can start to turn the mindsets around focusing on it. We're also having to try and introduce a level of capability within the organisation for working within uncertainty. And for most of us, we have been able to rely heavily on the fact that we're a process-driven industry. We are able to, almost to the second time, the type, the ton, the product quality, and what we're doing. And the minute we start to try and introduce high levels of uncertainty into our workforce or into the work that we're doing, we find that we do need to practice some of those skills, and we do need to develop a greater level of collaboration, a greater ability to work together, to ask questions, to be inquisitive, to seek to understand, and to maybe be wrong every now and then, and to maybe get it wrong. So having that ability to fail. And so how we bring this risk-based and uncertainty-based thinking into our work is absolutely critical to ensuring that we continue to reach that ultimate goal of value creation. But because we are also really keen to be able to share with all of our organisations some things that they can follow, some guidelines and some principles that they can lean on, we've developed what we call our How We Work Together principles. And these emerged after our executive team several years ago travelled to spend some time with Amazon in the United States. And they really came back and said, look, they've got some of these great tools and some great ways that they're bringing their people together. And one of them was these How We Work Together principles. So for us, it's about having some things, some behaviours that we can talk to around innovating, leading, collaborating, delivering, taking action and engaging. And so we're trying to encourage our people to not just talk about things like always getting results and always getting it right, always delivering on time, on budget, on schedule. We've probably all heard those words said to us many, many times before, but we're starting to try and get them to talk about things such as, let's do things via partnerships instead of via a hierarchy. Let's always think and act differently about this and challenge, could we have done it differently? And we've also really been focusing on how do we bring in agile planning and agile delivery over necessarily doing everything following a waterfall approach, so that you do have that opportunity to continuously deliver value every day from the very first moment you start, whilst also being able to pivot and change along the way as you learn more and things take new shape. We've also started to talk a little bit about this concept of wicked problems, and this is a part of the whole capability build around working within uncertainty, is that sometimes we don't know the single path. Now, many people would say that that squiggly line looks more like the inside of my head than it probably does an actual project delivery line. But the reality is a lot of what we deal with doesn't have a single line answer and a single path to get there. And sometimes you've got to circle back on yourself multiple times to be able to come out the other side. And even once you've done that, you're probably still going to have to keep doing work on it. And we're also trying to look at how do people understand how what they're doing is connected to things that other people are doing, and start to see things from a systems approach and from a systems thinking level, to be able to go and have those right conversations, to challenge things and to come up with better solutions. And by introducing these concepts into people, we're really starting to see our people approach their work in a really different way. So just a couple of things to show you about where our work does take place. Up there in the top left-hand corner, we made a bold move, and for many it's not a bold move, but for us it was huge to move just over a year ago to a new headquarters in Adelaide. And we said the day we moved from our old office to this one, no one was to bring a single piece of paper. And to this day, we do not have a single piece of paper in that office. So we moved over straight away and have managed to maintain that as a digital workspace. What we have done is introduced a significant amount of workshopping, and over on the right-hand side there, you'll see an embedding new ways of working, sitting around a ping pong table in a shed. And I would say that our post-it note budget went through the roof. So maybe we're not 100% paperless just yet. But we are experimenting now in our remote working environment with some online tools and some fantastic online facilitators and collaborators to help us be able to move those big workshops into an online space. We've been teaching our people how to undertake design thinking and how to use lean prototyping and agile delivery in those workshop environments. And certainly the office space is a lot of fun. I would say people go there more to collaborate than they do go there to necessarily do work, but we've still got a long way to go. We have started to focus heavily on building really strong networks and inviting people in. The industry often does things called lunch and learns. I'm not sure if you do those where you are, but the lunch and learns have evolved with us. We film those and make those available, and we have just last month opened Oz Minerals' internal podcast studio, and we are just about to start doing our podcasts across all of our operations so that people can start to connect more widely. And a lot of the challenge with FIFO and remote staff is they don't get to attend wonderful conferences and be a part of everything all the time because they're on site holding the fort together. Hopefully, as we move to a digital world, we see more people being able to engage in forums like this. We try and collaborate internationally. We try and spend a lot of time getting outside of what we know is normal and seeing what other people think is normal. It's funny how, if you think about how a copper mine is run in Australia, they're probably run the same all over Australia, but maybe if you pop over to Canada, you'll start to see some differences in how the Canadians mine. The same would go for nickel, and it makes you wonder, why is there a nickel mining process in Canada and a nickel mining process in Australia? And I think there's just a lot of repeated behaviours that we can start to share and learn from each other. And it wouldn't be right if I didn't put Andrew Scott in a slide to show that he definitely did come and do work. So he was definitely in Adelaide running a community of practice session for us when we were just dipping our toe in the water on how we would bring our devolved business model together and start to try and get all of our assets who, as I mentioned earlier, have been given that accountability and authority to run their own journey. How would we get them to start to want to work together to create a project around automation? And that's what really leads me to talk about the quote in the middle there, is that as much as we've given people that individual accountability and authority, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go a long way, go together. And we're really trying to get our people to put in sustainable practices and ways of working together to get us out there in the long term. Which brings me close to the end of my presentation, and I want to just touch on a core part for us, is that I've spoken a lot about our work internally, but we can't do this all on our own, and if we tried to, it would be crazy. And so a core part of our strategy is actually about partnering. And I found this chart. It's actually from the pharmaceuticals industry, and really what they were saying is that they have tried to work on collaborative research projects together for a long time, and what happened is that the researchers learnt more, but the companies never really shifted. And there's quite a bit of interesting literature around how it needs to be brought more in-house and how people need to work closer together to find ways to get further up that curve of increasing their collaboration to create more and more value. Partnering only came on our strategy last year, and I would say that as much as we use the word partnering to mention a lot of our fantastic suppliers and community groups and government groups that we do work with, they're probably heading down more in that transactional and preferred category still. I think that the documentation that underpins those partnerings are your traditional kinds of documents, even though they have got partnering well within their behaviours. And I often say to people, what will it take for us to move further up that curve and further up towards that integration? And I don't say that these are the right words or the right categories, but I think we all get the idea that there are stages that you can go through. And a lot of that comes down, I think, to earning trust and starting to earn trust with people and starting to develop and build relationships at an organisational level. And over on the left-hand side, we did a demonstration of this attempt with a group in Australia called OZWay. You may have heard of OZWay. They approached us and said, we really want to do things a little bit different. So we said, look, we're not in the position at the moment where we wanted to run it like a sponsorship. So let's have a go, and we'll just commit to every event that you run, and then we'll expand out from there with what we've learned. So we started with a presentation and a pretty standard conference view. We then moved to a absolute fireside innovation partner project where at their large conference, we opened up the Slack platform and we collaborated on that to try and get some people discussing things over the conference. And some of it worked and some of it didn't, but that was okay. By the time we got to the third conference, we were running detailed collaborative exchange workshops in the middle of the conference where people would talk and then break out and come back in again. And we're in the process now of looking at what's the next stage. And it's been a fantastic way where OZWay and Oz Minerals have been able to talk about the learnings they've been and the journey they've been on together as we start to work out what is the partnership opportunity that we could actually take forwards. So it's been about being brave to try. So to close out, I really just wanted to come back to OZWay and just kind of reaffirm that ultimately everything that we're trying to do about transforming the OZWay is about people. It is about personifying value. It's about personifying what we do. It's about thinking about how we want to engage, how do we want to build capability, how do we want to make that sustainable, and ultimately how are we going to use that to ultimately go beyond what's possible to make lives better. Thank you for listening to me today.